Hello everyone. My name is Elise. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing so good today. We are going to be doing my wrap up for the month of August today. And again, my wrap up is coming very late in the next month. So I'm going to do my best to try and remember these books as best as possible, my thoughts on them. I definitely remember the general feeling and how much I liked each of them, so that's a good sign. But I think we have, like usual, the 7 books that I seem to read every month to go over. So we're gonna start in the order that I read them, like always. So first up, we have what ended up being a surprise hit for me, a surprise 5-star read, because it was indeed 5 stars. And that is First Blood by Amelie Nothomb. This one is translated from the French. Is it by Alison Anderson? Yes, she's who did her last one that I read by her. And this is published by Europa Editions. I picked this one up purely on the back of my love for Thirst by this author, also translated by Alison Anderson as well. And I adored that book so much. I read it a couple years ago. And this was her next release to come out in English, and also a very short novella like the last one. But the premise of this one I was nervous about because it says it's following a white man who at the very beginning is in the Republic of Congo and he's facing a firing squad, and then you get the backstory of how he got there. And I was unclear on how that was going to play into it, but this book is so much more than that, like truly. The main bulk of this novel takes place when the narrator is young and he goes to live with some extended relatives of his out in the countryside. I think this takes place in the 60s. Yes, 1964. And this boy is living more of a privileged life, and his family out in the countryside, he gets sent there because his father wants to toughen him up and knows that the man of the house out there is very tough on the kids. And that's basically code for like abusive in the form of neglect. So he goes to the countryside and meets this family. There's a lot of children and they're all essentially raised kind of like wild animals. They have to take care of themselves to the point where like they are barely given any food as well, and like don't have enough to survive. And some of the kids die, and that's the family's way of weeding out the weak, which sounds very bleak and grim, and it is, but somehow the tone of this, similar to the tone in Thirst, has a satirical bent to it, and that does help you read some of the dark subject matter. That section of him staying with the family out in the wilderness in this big old decrepit manor is so magical. I know that's a crazy word to use based on what I just described, but it really is. This author has such a gift for description, and I just felt like I was there living with them in our protagonist's head, and I absolutely loved it. I loved every second of it. This is definitely taking on themes of class, and then Amelie Nothomb has said that this is inspired by her own father's life. So very intriguing. And this is really like a coming of age novel, and I haven't read one of those in a while, and I absolutely loved every second of it. And it's just deciding like, what kind of man does this guy want to be? And it was lovely, lovely, lovely to read. Dark subject matter for sure, but the tone lightens the mood a little bit. So that is First Blood by Amelie Nothomb. We started the month off strong. And then let's see, I'm consulting my notes. Okay, next up we have A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. I have the Hodder editions, and this is the second book. Yes, the second book in what is now, I know, a quartet, not a trilogy, the Wayfarer Quartet. I read the first one a couple months back, and I'm trying to maybe finish this whole series this year. I'm going to try. And this is the second one. These are companion novels, so they're not true sequels. And I was actually surprised at how much they're unrelated to one another. Basically, this one picks up with a very side character in the first book, and it's their story more fleshed out. None of the other characters are involved really, and it's another found family story that is tackling the theme of belonging and what it means to be different and how we can try and find some acceptance for one another, which I am now getting the sense are what all of her books are about. I've only read 3 so far, but that's definitely what a lot of hers are about. So still enjoying this. This one I liked slightly less than A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, but I'm still very much going to continue on in the series. I really want to come back to some of the original cast. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we shall see. So yeah, this is A Closed and Common Orbit. Then we have another 5-star read. And this was my favorite read of the month, I'm pretty sure. And that is Annie Bot. This is by Sierra Greer and it's published by Mariner Books. And I listened to the audiobook of this one from my library and oh my God, this is as good as everyone is saying that it is. It was, if I had done 5-star predictions this year, which I did not, I'm skipping them this year, this would have been one of them. It follows a woman named Annie who is an AI. She was originally created as a, what do they call them? Like something like a love bunny or something like that. She's like not just a sex doll, she's like a live-in girlfriend, but sex is obviously a strong component of what people would purchase her model for. So she has been switched into a mode that turns on her AI and she's starting to learn. She's starting to learn a lot about how to be a better partner to her owner. I can't remember his name, but honestly he's a fucking asshole, so who cares what his name was. But you can tell by my emotion that this I thought was such good character work. Oh my God, I have not read characters like this in a long time that felt so nuanced and complicated and rich. Like, it was just spectacular to read. And for me, this was a portrayal or an allegory around abuse, domestic abuse, and how nefarious that can really be and how it just like lives under the surface of all of these everyday interactions. It did a wonderful job of showing that through this framework of an AI, because I think it makes you question if it's an AI, like what do we think about the treatment of an AI? Like would we allow them to be in an abusive situation? And that added layer on top of tackling some of the troubling commonality of the abuse that's happening, I thought made the book all the more interesting. Also, it's super plotty. There's a lot going on with this plot. So I think it could be a great book for a really wide range of readers because it has great characters, great plot, and really important themes that it's discussing. So I would highly, highly recommend it. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I would imagine this is going to be in my best books of the year. So I absolutely loved it and echo all the good things that everybody else is saying about it. So that is Annie Bot. And then next up, let's see, we have another, what would have been a 5-star prediction, a backlist one, is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacquline Harpman. This one is translated by Ross Schwartz, and I have the vintage edition. I wish I had the Transit Books edition, but sadly I do not. So maybe I will switch over to that edition one day. But if you're gonna buy it, buy the Transit Books edition. But this book has had a resurgence, and it's made me really want to get to it sooner rather than later. And this book is very interesting. I get why a lot of people love it. I will say it wasn't quite a 5-star for me. It was like a 4-star if I were to give it a star rating. But this follows our main protagonist, who is, I think, a teenager when we first meet her. And she is being held against her will in a bunker with, I think, 39 other women. I think there's 40 of them in total. But she is by far the youngest of any of the women by a drastic amount, like a generation's worth. You get their day-to-day life, but it's all from her perspective, which is really interesting from the author because she has never known, or at least doesn't remember, life outside of being confined. And we're, in her mind, trying to come to terms with what's happening, how does she fill her days. She has all of these questions about life and kind of the meaning of life, but none of the other women are willing to talk with her about that because they think they're protecting her from more philosophical concepts like freedom and love and happiness, which they think that she will never know, and it will only hurt her to know of them. Sort of like the ignorance is bliss type of mindset. I also think this book is reissued. When was this initially published? Let's see. 1988 is when the author originally wrote it. And this is a very feminist novel. It's really trying to give some representation to what an all-female society might look like. And I would imagine this would have been very progressive for its time in that sense. So I think this was doing a lot of really great things. Get why people love it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it myself. So that is I Who Have Never Known Men. Next up, we have a short story collection, y'all, which is crazy because I have not been able to be reading these, but I think I'm back in my game. So we're gonna go with the momentum, and I read Sweetlust. This is by Bakic, and it's translated by Jennifer Zoble, I think from the Bosnian, if I'm remembering correctly. And this one is published by the Feminist Press. And I overall enjoyed this collection, but I will say right off the bat, there's a caveat that you need to look up trigger warnings before going into this. This collection is trying to look at the interplay between sex and sensuality and violence. So, you know, be prepared. There's surrealist takes on that. And I think that allows us to tackle that subject in a way that feels more accessible and less like trauma dumpy, for lack of a better word. This book was dark for sure. There's some dark humor going on here, but overall I thought the collection was a success in what it was trying to achieve in showing this strange interplay. And, you know, for better or worse, there were definitely things in here that I think, you know, most, if not every woman can resonate with, and like the casual nature of harassment and violence. And there's also a real sense of like pushing back or fighting back with some of the women in these stories. So yeah, this I thought was overall good. Not amazing, but overall good, and I would recommend it if that subject matter it is palatable to you, but also would be interesting. So that is Sweetlust. And then we have The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This one is published by William Morrow, and this was the book that I needed to read from my book haul revisit. It is a book that my mother-in-law gifted me, and she has gifted me the other Lucy Foleys that I have read. I think maybe not the first one, but now this is the third, and I overall enjoyed this one. It follows a woman, what is her name? I never remember anyone's name. Jess. She's going to visit her brother in Paris, and when she arrives at his apartment, he's not there, and there's definitely some weird things that should clue her into the fact that something has happened to her, but she ignores that. And to some extent, I get that, you know, we're probably not going to want to go to the worst case scenario right away because statistically that's low, but there are some glaring things that I think should point to the fact that he is unwell, that he is, something has befallen him. But she starts staying in his apartment and is starting to look for him. And in doing that is asking the other residents of this apartment complex what they know about him, trying to investigate essentially. And she starts to very quickly realize that there is something shady afoot, and all of these tenants seem to have secrets or reasons that they would want to hide things about their relationship with her brother. So she clearly starts getting involved in a sticky situation, and all hell breaks loose from there. I do think Lucy Foley does a really good job of tapping into these archetypal characters and putting you on a really propulsive ride. I definitely wanted to like keep reading and figure out what had happened and who had done what and all those types of things. There are some like highly coincidental things that happen in here. So those are the reasons why I never fully like outright love Lucy Foley's work. But overall, super enjoyable, entertaining. I did not see everything coming because there's normally like multiple reveals in her books. And Jess was definitely one of those like quintessential, like badass female characters. And I liked her vibe. So I know some people have said that this isn't fast paced enough for them. I thought it was fairly fast paced. Maybe not as much as a true genre thriller where it's like, you know, you're on the edge of your seat the whole time, your heart is pumping. I think there's a strong like mystery element to this, but I still thought there were like lots of high stakes going on. So that is The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. And then we have, what is it? Dogs of Summer, Days of Summer. And my laptop has now died, so I can't look up the name of the author or the publisher or anything like that. So I will put that all on the screen. I'll put the author, I'll put the translator, and I'll put the publisher up on the screen. And I read this at the very end of the month because I will say it was Women in Translation month. So I was trying to read Women in Translation and I did pretty good. I read these 3 physical copies and then I read Dogs of Summer on audio from my library. And this one, I don't know how I feel about it. This was a mixed bag for me. It reminded me a lot of Old Lady Voice that I read at the very beginning of this year. Almost like these like crude, vulgar, young female characters who have a darkness to them, but also a naivete, and that contradiction is both interesting and scary to read about in some sense. This follows a friendship of 2 young girls. And I do believe that this is pretty queer coded. It doesn't overtly say that either of the characters are queer, but there's definitely like queerness happening. And I thought it did a really good job of representing how confused and awkward, but also like how horny you can be when you're young, and like trying to make sense of all those emotions at the same time is really strange and almost surreal in a sense. And you make honestly bad decisions because your brain has not fully formed, so you can't always make good decisions for yourself. And yeah, it was like messy, sticky, hot summertime, just a total vibe, but very short. And I will say ultimately somewhat forgettable for me, even though it was the last book I read that month. And like, I know I am basically a month out from reading it, but I don't remember it that vividly like I do some of the other books here in my mind. So take that for what you will. A lot of people really enjoy that book, but I thought it was a nice little like flash in the pan moment that I enjoyed while it lasted, but am probably, you know, gonna let fade in my memory now. So those are the 7 books that I read in the month of August. Please let me know if you have read any of these books and what you thought about them, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.